Good morning, Boker Tov. May it be good morning. We share Besoros Tovos. May we hear good news, please God, from our brothers and sisters in Israel. The hostages should come home. Our soldiers should return to their families. We should have a sweeping victory over our enemies. The Emunah series is generously sponsored by Dr. Zavi and Bella Morgan, in memory of Rabbi Dr. Brian Galbit, and in memory of Bella's mother, Dr. Ellen Chanzer. We remain very grateful to the Morgans. The shir is also sponsored by Ayelet Berkowitz in honor of the upcoming wedding of Dvorah Berkowitz and Jacob Penn. The Bezocha to build a bias Neman B'Yisrael. Amen. Okay, well done. Well done. Appreciate everybody's flexibility with the time of the shir today. Baruch Hashem just came from a bris, a big mazel tov to the Rosh Kollel of the Yeshiva South Florida, to Rabbi and Rebbetzin Rosenfeld, on the birth and bris of their son Meshulam David, named for of David Soloveitchik, Meshulam David. He should grow to give them tremendous nachas. I had the schus, I'm saying this not to flex, but to give a bracha. I had the schus to merit to be the sandik at the bris, and it's brought down that when you're a sandik, you have the power to give brachas. There's a long line of people after. Now, I don't know how long the sandik holds the charge. I don't know how long the charge lasts. I'm not in the seat anymore. I'm certainly, as a person, unworthy. The chair and being the lap of the bris was. But I give you all and us all and anyone listening everywhere a bracha. We should all have good health. We should have longevity. We should have nachas from our family. We should grow in Torah and Yiras Shamayim. We should have peace in Israel and around the world. And Hashem should answer Kol Mishalos Libenu L'Tova, please God. From one simcha to a next week, Baruch Hashem, we have a wedding in New York. So the Emunah shir is going to be on Thursday, not Wednesday. Pay attention carefully to the Emunah WhatsApp group, and you will always be informed about when we are meeting, when we are learning, and where you can find us in Mitzvah Hashem. We should always have to reschedule because of going from simcha to simcha, please God. A couple of Emunah emails, and then we'll dive into a new limud. There are copies sitting here if you'd like. It's going to take us several weeks to learn it. You could keep it and bring it back, or put it back on the table afterwards, and we'll continue to learn a beautiful new piece by the Pnei Menachem. But first, a couple of emails. Dear Rabbi, I really enjoy listening to Living Emunah. I appreciate the words of wisdom, blah, 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 blah. I've been thinking of sending you an experience I've had for a while, and finally decided to write it down and send it. Several months ago, my father passed away at a ripe old age. And after having lived a very full and wonderful life, he's still very missed. I did not grow up in an observant home, but Baruch Hashem, I'm observant now. My parents and siblings always seem to respect the religious observance that my husband and I and my children choose to follow. So when my father passed away and the funeral arrangements were made by my siblings, who are not observant, I was very upset. I so wanted to make sure my father was buried in the most dignified and respectful manner, as well as in a halachically correct manner. However, I was not consulted by my siblings. As much as I tried to explain the importance of having the burial ASAP, no one would budge. For various reasons, no one other than my immediate family understood the importance of this. I kept on talking and praying to Hashem to help me honor my dad and fulfill the mitzvah of respecting my dad with a proper halachic funeral and burial. Then, several days later, once the body of my late father was finally transported to New Jersey, I received a call from the local rabbi of the Chevra Kadisha asking me to confirm my father's Hebrew name and which shroud to select for my father. The rabbi explained the shroud that was selected is halachically acceptable, but the linen shroud is preferable because that's what the priest, the Kohanim, used, and it's no longer than the one that was originally selected, and it's longer than the one that was originally selected. Baruch Hashem, I felt Hashem really heard my prayers by allowing me the opportunity to honor my father with a dignified and respectful burial according to halacha. I confirmed my father's Hebrew name. We selected the linen shroud for my father. To this day, I have no idea how the Chevra Kadisha obtained my contact info, since I had nothing to do with the arrangements. But of course, Hashem has his ways. Thank you for help strengthening my Emunah. Shir my Emunah emails really share. Help me keep my Emunah and Hashem strong at a difficult time. Sincerely, so-and-so. So again, person davened so badly to Hashem, help me honor my father. Wasn't involved in the arrangements. No reason that she would have received the call, but she got the call that helped her honor her father. So never give up. A Yid never gives up. A Yid never gives up. Yesh Shalom Midas. A Yid never has Yesh. We never have despair. We never give up. We always daven. We keep coming back. Hashem has his ways. And if the funeral director of the Chevra Kadisha is meant to find us, they will find us. And if they're not meant to find us and they didn't find us, then we also shouldn't feel bad. In life, we can only do the best that we can. And then we surrender and leave the rest up to him. We let go and we let God, because he is the one in charge and he is the one in control. One more email, and then we'll dive into our new limud together. Dear Rabbi Goldberg, I must begin by sharing your living Emunah shir is having a deeply spiritual impact in my life. In a time that feels very hard for me personally, as well as intensely painful for all the Jewish people, I find solace, comfort, and safety in the shiurim. Thank you. The other day I was listening to episode 300, and I felt there was Ruach HaKodesh, a holy spiritual calling, where I felt many coincidental connections from the words of Torah you were speaking to my own life. I don't think I shared this one last week. Did I? At the start of the shir, you mentioned speaking with Ma'uz's parents, a holy martyr of the Jewish people, a paratrooper in Gaza who left us in such an untimely and tragic way. Which, if you didn't hear, you should listen to the Behind the Beam a couple weeks ago, where we interviewed Ma'uz's parents, who are extraordinary people in their own right, who described how Ma'uz lived and died the same way, which was Al Kiddush Hashem, and the candle that he kept burning through his life of learning, and the way he left this world. It's well worth listening to them. Incredibly inspiring. So the author of the email writes, Rabbi Goldberg, I have a 6 degree of separation connection to Ma'uz. Without revealing too many details, his cousin is a profoundly important member of my own community. A few weeks ago, I hosted women in my home where we learned the Hakdama Mesilas Hasharim in his memory, Ma'uz ben Eitan. Mesilas Hasharim was a very special sefer for Ma'uz, and it felt appropriate to begin with the quiet brilliance of the introduction to that sefer during this night of learning. Hearing you mention connecting with Ma'uz's parents felt very full circle, godly, in fact, and not coincidental at all. May his neshama have an aliyah from the beautiful Torah learned in his memory. Second part of my own Emunah journey goes like this. A year and a half ago, I was hosting Friday night dinner in my home. Beautiful, lovely, with good friends, delicious food. Outside as the weather was magnificent. At some point during the meal, I looked across the table and my husband, who seldom complains, looked off to me. I asked if he was okay and everyone stopped talking while he nodded slowly. Let's go inside, I suggested, and he got up to go inside and was walking very, very slowly. I shouted, something is wrong, and the guests jumped out of their chairs and caught my husband as he collapsed and passed out on our patio. I work very quickly in emergencies. This is something I know about myself. I ran inside and called 911 as our dear friends carried my unconscious husband inside. We spent the night in the hospital and everything was okay, Baruch Hashem. No extensive testing was required. The doctors chalked it up to exhaustion, stress, typical stuff, but very scary nonetheless. Fast forward to this past December. It was Friday night again. This time we're at a friend's house for an oneg type of get-together. Food, drinks, friends, lively conversation. My husband did look a bit tired that night, and he had shared with me that it had been a long week prior to coming to our friend's house. At one point during the evening, my husband left to get some water. Moments later, I heard a crash, and 25 people got up and raced around the corner. I knew without even seeing him that he had collapsed, and he had. Unfortunately, this time, he hit his head very hard on a granite countertop, splitting open his forehead, gushing blood while passed out on the floor. This time, I was not okay. The trauma from the first time had barely healed. Everyone jumped into action. I'll spare the details, but it was dire and traumatic. He continued losing and regaining consciousness, seizing, and more. I'm shaking just thinking about the experience. We were rushed into the ambulance. Unfortunately, it got worse at the hospital before it got better. Because he had hit his head so hard, there was a significant loss of blood and fear of concussion. He required an MRI and CT scan of his brain. This time, we didn't leave the hospital unscathed. They found a small blip on the MRI, which the doctor shared could be fine, could be bad. We'll have to wait 6 weeks and see if there are any changes before we determine what it is. It was a grueling 6 weeks of waiting before the next scan. During those 6 weeks, our Rav called to check in and said, Basar V'dam can do all the scans they want. Man, doctors can do all the scans they want. Hashem decides what's on the scans. Now we daven. The day of the MRI arrived. A top neurologist shared the results. The blip is a small cluster of enlarged blood vessels. Most likely the cluster has always been there since my husband was born. These blood vessels need to be monitored yearly with a brain MRI as they have the potential to burst, which God forbid could be very dangerous. Now that we know my husband has this, we have the knowledge and power to do everything we can to monitor the situation and treat it if needed, like if the size or location changes, which we'll know during the yearly MRI. My husband asked the doctor, is this condition connected to my collapsing and fainting? The doctor said, absolutely not. They have nothing to do with why you collapsed. The collapsing was just bad luck. But, Rabbi Goldberg, we all know there's no such thing as bad luck. I know with my whole heart that Hashem created an environment where my husband had extra tiring weeks so he would faint, so that we'd get extra testing, so we'd find the cluster of vessels, so we could monitor them, and God willing, keep him from having something very dangerous happening. Thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Hashem, for seeing the whole entire picture with all of its intricate parts. Thank you, Hashem, for giving us something we can handle, for the opportunity to be able to monitor something with negative potential. Thank you, Rabbi Goldberg, for guiding me and seeing the little sparks of light and Emunah in my life experiences. May we all know no more pain and sorrows. May Hashem bring the redemption of his people speedily and without delay. Wishing you a peaceful and beautiful Shabbos. So, again, it's another example. It could be miserable and bitter. Why do you have to collapse? Why do you have to split his head open? Why do you have to keep going back to the hospital? Why does he have to have this cluster of blood vessels? Or you can say, Hashem, there's a master plan. It's all orchestrated. It all comes, picture comes into, is a little clearer now, and why things happen. So these Emunah emails give us strength to live our lives and see Hashem in our life. Like my daughter the other day, who when her daughter threw up everywhere, put in our Hashkacha Pratis group. Thank God it happened while the help was still here and could help me clean it up. Hashkacha Pratis. The timing of her daughter's vomit. If that's not Hashkacha, I don't know what is. So, but we always say Hashkacha Pratis are the big things and the little things. From medical things and life-altering things and life-threatening things to someone was there. She watches 3 kids and her husband travels to New York for work. So she needed that help. It's hard to watch 3 babies under 2 and clean vomit. So she said it's Hashkacha, that it happened when it happened. Her mother also thinks it's Hashkacha, because otherwise she probably would have been there cleaning the vomit. I don't think it's Hashkacha, because there was no way I was going to clean that vomit. Even if there was no one else in the world. Maybe if there was no one else in the world, and then it's a big maybe. But anyway, that you have to have that Hashkacha Pratis WhatsApp group. You have to keep that family diary and journal. You have to look to see the hand of Hashem in everything, in the way that things work out. Nothing is a coincidence. Everything is by design. And therefore, that's the common peace that we can have, not to live anxious and worried and nervous in what will be. It's all part of the adventure called life, and we'll see how it turns out. And that's hard to do when you're waiting for 6 weeks to the next MRI to find out what that blood clot means or blood cluster means. It's hard to say, it's a fun adventure. Let's see how it turns out. It's hard. But what's the alternative? To go crazy? To drive oneself crazy? We spoke about last week. V'ha'ikar lo lehis pached klal. Rabbi Nachman did not write that the main thing is to not be afraid. He said the main thing is not to make ourselves afraid, not to create anxiety and panic, not to create worry, to let go and let God and realize I do everything I can and I do the best I can. And after that, I let go and it's up to him because there is no alternative. Which brings us up to this piece in front of you. Comes from the Otzer Drashos U'Ma'amarim, a collection of the sermons and the speeches of the Pnei Menachem. Who was the Pnei Menachem? Rav Pinchas Menachem Alter, who was the previous Gera Rebbe. He lived 1926 to 1996. And he was born in Poland, but then was in Eretz Yisrael. First he was the Gera Rosh Hashiva, and then he became, after his half-brother passed away, who was the previous Rebbe, he became the Gera Rebbe. We studied something previously of his, the Gera Rebbe, the Pnei Menachem. So this was Or Lochav Zayin Tevis Tavshin Nun Aleph. This was immediately before the Milchama HaMifratz, which is otherwise known as the Persian Gulf War. This was a sicha, a speech that he delivered shortly before the outbreak, but when we all knew it was coming. If you remember, the news was braced. It was a different world than the way we live in now. Now, before the news reports, there are videos that already come online of everything that happens because of the internet and WhatsApp and cell phones and cameras. But then everybody was hanging tight and holding tight to the news. My first cousin got married in Israel the night of the first Scud attack. My sister was in Israel for her year in Israel, her gap year. My father went for the wedding, which was a question. Do you go or not go into what is possibly a war zone? What's amazing, do you remember how many missiles total were shot in the Persian Gulf War towards Israel? It was under 50. I think it was under 50 total. And there were all these discussions of what a miracle it was. There were people who passed out from anxiety and panic and fear. I think there was one person who lost their life because of they had a heart condition and the fear of the Scud missiles. But if you remember, the world marveled and we couldn't believe, and we spoke about the Nisim and Niflos, the revealed miracles of 50 or 60 missiles, and nobody was directly killed. I think there were 50 missiles yesterday in the north, and one person was killed in Kiryat Shmona from the missile in the north. How the world has so radically changed, and what we defined as what we tolerate. Do you remember then also that Israel was ready to respond, and America begged Israel, don't get involved, we've got this, we're fighting. Iraq, who invaded Kuwait, don't get involved, even if they launch missiles. Israel had nothing to do with it. Why launch missiles at Israel? Because Iraq invaded Kuwait and America attacked Iraq, so you launch missiles at Israel? You remember, it was 1990. Nothing to do with it. But because why not? Israel is and always was, and sadly seems it will be the target. no matter whose conflict it is. And it was so relatively few missiles, less than an hour today. And the world said, Israel, you have a right to respond, but don't. We got it. Now everybody says, and we saw the abstention in the UN, ceasefire, even with a barrage of missiles like that in an hour and people getting killed. But if you remember, everybody was tied to the news. And is this war going to break out? Will missiles come to Israel? The big danger was if they would have chemical heads, chemical weapons. That's why everyone was fitted for gas masks. The pictures of my cousin's wedding, they're all dancing with the gas mask around their arm. And that night was the first Scud attack. And the couple spent that night in the sealed room with the rest of the wedding party as the alarms and sirens wailed and the first Scuds came over. So as we were bracing and the world was watching and the world was getting ready and Israel was preparing and distributing these masks, that's when the Pnei Menachem, living in Yerushalayim, leading the Gera Chasidus, that's when he delivered this Sikha. That was the timing of this Sikha, and many of its messages and messaging are relevant to us right now, which is why I want to share it and learn it together, as we are now have Purim in the rearview mirror, and we're looking through the windshield at Pesach, and it's coming quickly. Coming quickly. Let's start from the second paragraph. Menaktem tchila as divrei Gemara. We begin with the words of the Gemara, the Talmud in Masechta Avodah Zarah, Daf Beis. Lasad lava maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu Sefer Torah. We're told that a prophecy, a prediction, that Lasad lava in the future, the Almighty will come holding on to a Torah scroll b'cheiko. V'omer and I'll say, Komi she'asak ba yava v'yital scharo. Kadosh Baruch Hu will be holding this Torah, and I'll say, whoever learned it and lived it, whoever was promoting it and sharing it, whoever was occupied and preoccupied with it, come and receive your reward. Come and get your reward. That was the reason and purpose for my whole world was this Torah. This is the instruction manual and the blueprint. This is the value system and the ideology. This was what was supposed to guide the world. So if you were part of that plan, if you lived it and loved it and taught it and shared it, then come get your reward. Whole purpose of the world is one big stage and one big platform for Torah. Torah is our guide. This is a world of interpersonal relationships, identity, appetite and cravings and drives. This is a world bound by time. This is a physical world with physical components. How do we navigate it? Your vacuum cleaner, which is infinitely less complicated than the world, comes with instructions, right? Your food processor, which is infinitely less complicated than you, comes with instruction manual. So where's our instruction manual? How do you know how to use you? What's the manual to you? Who are you? How do you operate? What happens when something malfunctions and you have a virus and it's not working? Where's the instruction manual to us? How do we connect with others? How do we relate to others? How do we react to others? How do we build relationships? How do we have responsibility to have children? If you want to drive a car, you have to take driving lessons. You have to pass a driving test. If you want to be you, if you want to be married, you get a marriage license, but there's no test that says, are you selfish or selfless? Are you narcissistic or you care about others? Are you only concerned with overpowering and micromanaging, or can you be mevater? Do you have the ability to surrender to the will of others? Could you imagine? Halavai, you should have such a marriage. To get a marriage license, you should have to take a marriage test, but we don't. To become a parent, you become a parent. It should be that before you are entitled to conceive, you should have to pass the parenting test, right? Are you a good role model? Will you show the selflessness to clean up the child's vomit, even if the help is not there? And so on. But yet there's no test, there's no instruction manual not to be married, not to be a parent, not to engage a diet, not how to live related to time, not how to combat drives and instincts and impulses. So the answer is there is an instruction manual to all of that. Here's the incredible news. While the world wasn't given it, we have it. We have it. So everyone else got the vacuum cleaner with no instruction manual in the box. Everyone else got the food processor with no instruction manual in the box and no website that has a backup copy. We got the box and we got the instruction manual in it. And that instruction manual is called the Torah. And Hashem says, here it is. Here's my guide. Here's my instruction. Here's the blueprint for life. And you can live the most meaningful and purposeful life. The most meaningful and purposeful life now. My brother shared, I don't know how he got it, my mother's first cousin. At his bar mitzvah, my mother's first cousin, Rabbi Soloveitchik, that's how, sent his parents a letter wishing Mazel Tov. Sent him a letter wishing Mazel Tov. So he writes in the letter wishing Mazel Tov. You'll see why I'm mentioning this in a moment. He writes in the letter wishing Mazel Tov, please accept my warmest greetings and congratulations. It was handwritten, and he didn't have the best handwriting. Upon the bar mitzvah celebration of your son, may the Almighty bestow upon him blessings and guide him along the path of a creative and meaningful life. And then he quotes some Maimer Chazal in Hebrew that I can't read. Isn't it interesting when Rav Soloveitchik was giving a bracha for a bar mitzvah boy, what he wished was a creative and meaningful life. I don't think I've ever filled out a card that way. For a creative and meaningful life. Isn't that interesting? Meaningful, yes. Mindful, yes. Productive, yes. Mission-driven, yes. But creative. It's a big insight into the Rav, into a Soloveitchik, into a Brisker. For a Brisker, the definition of a successful life is a creative life. If you weren't creative, that wasn't a meaningful life. Isn't that interesting? You don't find that nearly as interesting as I do. But I find that really interesting. That the definition of a successful and meaningful life for the Rav, for a Brisker, is a creative life. Creative. Okay, but a meaningful life. We have the instruction manual, Torah. Torah tells you, here's how to relate to food and space and intimacy and time and marriage and parenting and everything. So Hashem in Lasad Lavo, the Gemara tells us, our rabbis are telling us, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to hold up this Torah and is going to say, if you accepted and embraced my instruction manual and you lived according to it, come get your reward. So who are the first who are going to come? Try to get a piece of that reward, collect on it. You know who's going to come? Rome, the empire of Rome. And why do they get to go first? Because the Roman Empire, the great Roman Empire, because of Chashivusa, their grandeur, their greatness. HaKadosh Baruch is going to say, Maya Saktem. What right do you have? What's your entitlement? So they'll say, Ribono Shel Olam, Harbe Shvakim Tikninu. Do you know how many marketplaces we opened? Rome. You know how many malls and marketplaces? How much merchandise we produced? Harbe Merchatzos Asinu. How many bathhouses we created? V'kulam lo asinu el b'shvil Yisrael. Kadesh Yis'asku b'Torah. You know why we made kiosks in malls? So Israelis would have a place to work when they came to America. We did it all for the Jewish people. You know why we made these bathhouses? So Jews could go to the Schwitz and then get back to the Beis Medrash. They'd be able to enjoy a good Schwitz, and then they could go back to the Beis Medrash. We did it all for Torah. Hashem says, what do you think, I'm a fool? Romans, you did it all for yourselves. You did it all for your pleasure. You did it all for your enjoyment. Who are you fooling? Who are you kidding? You didn't do it for my children, for the Jewish people. You didn't do it for my Torah. Get lost. You have no right. So Hashem kicked out the representatives of the Roman Empire. And who came in next? Representative of Persia. Persia. Where's Persia? Iran. So the mullahs and the sheiks and the ayatollahs of Iran came in. Now I don't want to dismiss them so easily because the truth is there is an illustrious history between Persia and the Jews. King Koresh, we can thank for having built the second Beis Hamikdash. He helped bring the redemption, this return of the second temple, the second Beis Hamikdash. So there is a positive association with Persia, not only what we think of today as the Iran of today. So Melech Paras comes in, Malchus Paras comes in. Do you know how many bridges we built? And certainly we can appreciate today. Kola Olam Kulo Gesher Tzar Ma'od. After what happened in Baltimore yesterday. But you know, I don't know, maybe I'll speak about this on Shabbos. It should have taught us something in Surfside. It's not crazy that the building in Surfside collapsed. It's a miracle every building that stands. It's not insane that a bridge collapsed. It's insane how many bridges we travel over regularly that stand. I don't want to make anyone panic next time they go over a bridge. The point is, of course, engineers should study it. We have to figure out what happened with that ship and the communication and what went wrong and was there interference. Not minimizing the loss and the tragedy, and we daven for all the families who were affected. And our reaction should be empathy and sympathy and love and support, but also gratitude. Hashem, every time I go over a bridge, I should bench Gomo. What a miracle that engineers can cross a body of water and that we safely can traverse it. What a miracle. What a miracle. It's absolutely extraordinary. So Malchus Paras, the Persian representatives come and they say, Hashem, your Torah, you know why we get a piece of that? Because we built all these bridges, and why do we do it? Harbe Karachim Kavashnu, we conquered many cities. Harbe Milchama Asinu, we started many wars. V'kulam lo asinu el b'shvil Yisrael. Kadesh ask about Torah. You know why we built the bridges? You know why we conquered those territories? You know why we started and initiated wars? So the Jewish people could learn Torah. Who are you kidding? You did it all for yourselves. You did it all for your ambition. You know why you made bridges? So you could introduce a toll. That's why you made bridges. It's a big simcha. The Atlantic Bridge finally takes Easy Pass. Finally. Big simcha. So why do you make bridges? You know what it costs to go over the George Washington Bridge today? If there weren't enough reasons to move to Florida, move to Israel, of course, but on the way to Israel, Florida, you know what it costs to go over the George Washington Bridge one way? $17? It's a lot of money. Your daily commute. Okay, whatever it is. Anyway, you know why? A kid from Teaneck dated a girl from the 5 towns that was called geographically undesirable. George Washington Bridge toll, the Triborough toll, gas. Also, you had to George Washington Bridge, Triborough, to Manhattan, Triborough, cost of a restaurant in Manhattan, parking in Manhattan, back to 5 towns, back to find parking where you couldn't that hour, so you left it and you got a parking ticket. Every date was like a mortgage on a house. Was she worth more than worth it? She was more. The Schwiger wants to know, was she worth it? Many times over. Many times over. You know why? Someone's got to clean up the vomit. I'm just joking. I'm joking. That's not the reason she's worth it. That's not the reason she's worth it. Many, many, many more times than that. I would give everything and then some. I'd build bridges myself. So why were bridges built? Hashem says to the Malchus Paras, you didn't build the bridges for the Jewish people. You did it so you can make a toll. Karachim lasas be'mangaria. Cities, because you wanted to conquer. Milchama sani asisi. And wars, you didn't initiate wars, says Hashem. You know who created the wars? Me. Shenemar Hashem ish milchama. Hashem shemo. We say it in our davening. Hashem says, you think you started the wars? No war starts without my green lighting it. No war starts without my pressing go. Adkan, that's the Gemara. Strange Gemara. What a Gemara. Hashem's going to hold the Torah. He's going to say, anybody who took part in this, come get your reward. Rome's going to come, give some argument. Hashem's going to say, get out of here. Get lost, you fraudsters. And then Persia's going to come. Hashem's going to say, get lost. You were in it for yourselves. But in the get lost, you didn't start the wars. I started the wars. Mefarish Maharal says, Rav Yehuda Lowy of Prague, the Maharal of Prague, every nation has their inclination. Every nation has their nature. Every nation has their essence. Yitzhahara miyuchad. Every nation has their kryptonite. What's their kryptonite? What's that nation's Achilles heel? Malchus Edom Romi, the kingdom of Christendom, what we call Edom, which is the final gullus that we still find ourselves in today, the longest gullus by far. We spoke about yesterday at the Parsha Shir, that Zos Toras Ha'olah, the Or Chaim HaKadosh, who was suffering. He was only 1,700 years into the gullus. We're coming up on 2,000 years of this gullus. Egypt was 400 years, and the second gullus was 70 years. And this gullus is coming up on 2,000 years. This is a long, long gullus. and we begin to see the beginning of redemption, Aschalta de Gula, the return to our land. And as we wrote about last week, Rav Aviner Paskins, a soldier, when they put on their uniform in Israel, makes a Shechianu, that after 2,000 years, we have our own uniform, Shechianu on getting their weapon, because after 2,000 years, we have our own tanks, and we have our own guns, and we have our own Navy, and we have our own Air Force, and we have our own elite commandos. So that's a Shechianu, not because we embrace, not because we celebrate violence, because the capacity to defend ourselves, that's all the beginning of a redemption. But if October 7th and until now taught us anything, it's that even as we've tasted the beginning of redemption, we are still in the deep darkness of exile. I was texting with a mother of a hostage yesterday, and the way she ended the text with a line about how she can't breathe daily because of the pain that she's in, and how hard it is to catch her breath on a daily basis. The darkness of the exile we're still in. This is the Malchus of Edom, of Christendom, that began in Rome. Why Rome? Because that was the capital of Christianity. And even though today, perhaps, jury's still out, there is a warmer relationship between Christianity and Judaism, for 2,000 years, it was directly and indirectly responsible all the way through the Holocaust as accomplices to mass murder and attempted extermination of Jews. And that's why this exile is still the exile of Edom, of Rome. Turn the page. And also all the later exiles. This fourth exile has many cycles and many oppressors. This fourth exile of Christendom that began in Rome has many oppressors and persecutors along the way. Spanish Inquisition and expulsion, the Germans and the Poles, Ukrainians. There are no shortage of participants who were part of the oppressors of this fourth exile. And what's their Achilles heel, their kryptonite, their Yetzer Hara? They want wealth and extravagance. They want indulgence. So they made bathhouses and coliseums and malls. And they want the entire world to submit and surrender to this instinct of commercialism, of industry, of extravagance, of opulence. And they'll claim later that they didn't do it for themselves, they did it all for the Jewish people. And you know what Persians love? Conquering and killing. That's what they love. They're not tempted by introducing coliseums and the aesthetic and extravagance and opulence and ostentatiousness. You know what Persians love? Their Achilles heel? They love to conquer. They love to kill. They love to show their might. They love to control. The Persians have no peace because they just want to conquer. They're just in conflict. There's just tension. There's never peace. Malchus Yishmael. What about Islam? And the child of the continuity, the offspring of Persia, is Islam. And what is Islam? Para Adam Yishmael just wants to conquer and coerce the world to observe them. That's why it's the religion that has jihad. Jihad is holy war to force Sharia law on the world. Because it's not, even though the Jewish people, lahavdil, we the Jewish people have a vision and an image of what the world should look like. The Jewish people who are obligated in 613 mitzvos, and the rest of the world who worship and embrace and accept the same God, but are bound only by 7, the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. In our vision, if we are successful, if we can transform the world in God's image, the whole world will be made up of 2 people, the Jewish people and everyone else. Everyone else also, we're all worshiping and loving and recognizing and seeing and speaking to the same Hashem. And they have 7 obligations to him, and we have 613 because we're the honor society. So we have extra obligations. That's our vision. But in order to achieve our vision, we have no holy war. Not only do we not look to conquer or coerce or force or initiate war with anyone, we don't even proselytize. We don't even promote. We're not even out there trying to conquer or coerce or educate or invite. So Yishmael is the continuity of Paras, and Yishmael also, holy war, jihad, Sharia, trying to get the entire world to surrender to their vision for them. And they too are going to claim that their whole agenda in doing all of that is so the Jews can learn Torah. And the truth is, we do have a rich history even in worlds of Islam. Speak to the Moroccans in our community. You could go visit still Morocco today. And the Jewish community in Morocco and under Islam and in other periods of our history, there were wonderful relationships, and Jews had the ability to practice. And so Islam will say, we were fighting those holy wars and we did it for the Jews so they can sit in the base medrash. Hashem says, no. You made the theaters Rome, and you conquered cities, Persia, but I started the wars, and I know why I did it. So the Maharal is explaining what's going on in this Gemara is Hashem's identifying the Achilles heel, the Yetzer Hara, the particular temptation and the drive of each nation. But now the Pnei Menachem asks a series of questions. We may not get past it today. Today might just be the questions, and next week we'll begin the answers. Cliffhanger. I have to keep you coming back. He says, I have the following questions. Number one, I understand why the nations of the world they weren't honest, but I understand why they would advance the argument that the malls and the Colosseums and the bridges and the conquering cities was all done for the Jewish people. As the Mefarshim of the Torah, because all of these are responsibilities of a government. They're what those in leadership have to do to take care of their people. So even though they did it for themselves, they'll claim they were doing it to take care of the Jewish people. You can do business and transact. And that also benefits those who are learning Torah. As the Ravid writes, why were the bridges there? So Jews could go over them and make their weddings at the sands. Why were the bridges there? So Jews could traverse them and go from base medrash to base medrash and learn Torah. But they started wars so the Jewish people could learn Torah. How does that make sense? Does a war help Torah learning or hurt Torah learning? Adarabba, muna'asoso mafriaso. Do you know the disproportionate number of casualties in this war are of Hesder boys? Do you know how many from the Mechina, the yeshiva in Eli were killed? I think it's 18. In Eli, in Yerucham, in these beautiful yeshivas, these beautiful, beautiful budding Talmidei Chachamim, these Torah learners, because they disproportionately fight in combat units. Nobody's talking about it now, because you're not supposed to talk about it now, because in the middle of a war, you don't distinguish between soldiers or communities or where they come from. But when it will be over, please God, today, when this war will end, there'll be a lot of articles, and you'll see how the religious soldiers disproportionately volunteer and fight and are the best fighters and officers and commanders of combat units, because they're fighting for a mission and a cause. They're fighting for eternity and immortality. They're fighting for Hashem. And I think it's 40% of those who've been killed are religious soldiers who don't make up 40% of the army or 40% of Israeli society. And my numbers could be off, but I believe it's that high. These boys, by the way, who you know that when you sign up for Hesder, it's to do half of your service learning in the yeshiva and half in the army. And you know, many of them found out that the army needs them, and so it's coming out of their learning time, that they won't be going back to learn, or they won't be staying to learn before they have to begin their basic training. So a war doesn't help learning Torah. A war harms and hurts and compromises the learning of Torah. But the medrash are emptied out. So What's the argument that the Persians were saying we've started wars, and we started all those wars only so you could learn Torah? What kind of an argument is that? Secondly, Kadosh Baruch Hu answers, everything you did just for yourselves. The bridges where you collect tax, conquering cities so you could expand, the Colosseum so you could enjoy them, and the wars, that wasn't you, that was me. Hashem doesn't correct them and say you started those wars for yourselves. He says, you didn't start those wars, I did. But it's as if Hashem is conceding for whom were those wars started? For the Jewish people. Hashem doesn't correct them that the wars are not for the Jewish people. He says, you didn't start the wars, I did. But it's Ki'ilu implicitly conceding that the wars are for the Jewish people. Number 3, Ma Perish B'Tshuvas Hashem. What the Hashem answers, I made the wars. Hashem makes everything. There's no bridge that can be built without Hashem wanting it. So why did he only answer that and save that as his answer for the war? You didn't initiate the war, I did. Number 3. Number 4, and then as if it's not enough that Hashem says it, he has to quote a pasuk to prove it, Hashem. He says, you don't start the wars, I do. As it says, Shenamar, Hashem ish Milchama. What? And if he didn't quote a pasuk, Hashem, then we wouldn't believe him? Then it wouldn't be true? What does the pasuk even mean? Hashem is an ish Milchama? God should be thought of as a man of war? The greatest bracha that Jewish people give each other and that we long for and wish for in the world, the biggest kli machzik bracha is shalom, is peace. Peace is what we daven for. Every time we say our Shemona Esrei, we take 3 steps back and ask for peace. Every Kaddish, we ask for peace. Every blessing we give one another is for peace. Every blessing we give our children is for peace. Nobody wants more. Nobody's worked harder for. Nobody's willing to compromise more for peace than the Jewish people. All we want is peace. We learn that from Hashem, who's the God of peace. So what does the pasuk mean that God is Hashem, is ish milchama? God is a God of war? God is a God of war? What does it mean that God is a God of war? God is a God of peace. So these are the 4 questions that Pnei Menachem asks on this Gemara. So far today, all we did was read the Gemara that tells us lost level in the future. Hashem's going to hold the Torah, come get your reward. The Romans are going to come. He's going to say get lost. The Persians are going to say get lost. Each one why they should get lost. The Maharal is explaining why they each were advancing their argument because that's who they were. That's how their society was defined. Hashem says get lost. But the 4 questions. Number 1, when they said we made the war so that the Jews can learn Torah, you don't learn Torah when there's a war. You don't learn more Torah. Number two, why does Hashem say I made the wars? Hashem does everything. Number 3, why does he not correct them that it wasn't for the Jewish people as if the wars are for the how are wars for Jewish people? And number 4, why would Hashem describe himself as an ish milchama, as a person of war? All of this we'll answer next week with the Shem Yishmor, the Sachat Rebbe, about what war is all about and what it's meant to do for us, how it's meant to change us and transform us, how we're meant to connect to it and what we're supposed to do during it. Please God, by next week and Thursday morning at the Emunah Shir, we'll already be marking the end of the war, and the success and the triumph of the war. You should hear Besoros Tovos today and every day.